There are women in this world who return home to silence every night. Not because nobody chose them, but because somewhere deep inside their soul, they stopped choosing noise over peace. Welcome back. And tonight, we are entering a truth that society rarely dares to speak out loud. The truth about women who live alone without a boyfriend. A truth hidden behind quiet apartments, unread messages, late-night tears, cold coffee cups, and hearts that have learned how to survive without constant validation. Stay with me until the end, because what you are about to hear may completely change the way you see loneliness, love, and the women who carry entire emotional universes behind closed doors. There is something strangely powerful about a woman who learns how to exist alone in a world that constantly tells her she should not. From the time she was young, people filled her mind with invisible deadlines. They told her happiness would arrive when a man finally stayed. They taught her that being chosen was somehow the ultimate proof of her worth. And slowly, without realizing it, millions of women grew up believing that silence in their phone meant emptiness in their soul. But then there are those rare women who walk into the fire of solitude and discover something terrifying and beautiful. They realize they were never incomplete to begin with. They realize loneliness is not always punishment. Sometimes it is initiation. Sometimes life isolates a woman because her spirit can no longer survive shallow love. Most people misunderstand women who live alone. Society often paints them as cold, difficult, damaged, emotionally unavailable, or secretly miserable. But what nobody understands is that many of these women did not become distant because they hated love. They became careful because they once loved too deeply. There are women who gave their entire soul to people who only knew how to consume them. Women who stayed awake, comforting broken men while quietly bleeding themselves. Women who tolerated emotional neglect because they believed patience could transform selfishness into love. And after enough betrayal, something inside them changed forever. They stopped romanticizing suffering. They stopped begging to be understood. They stopped shrinking themselves just to make someone else feel powerful. A woman who lives alone without a boyfriend often carries a psychological depth that most people never notice. Carl Jung once said that loneliness does not come from having no people around you, but from being unable to communicate the things that seem important to you. And this is exactly the hidden pain many women carry in silence. They are surrounded by conversations that feel empty. They crave emotional intimacy, not temporary attention. They long for souls that speak honestly, not people performing affection while secretly protecting their ego. These women are not disconnected from love. They are disconnected from illusion. And once a person wakes up from illusion, they can never fully return to emotional blindness again. At night, when the world becomes quiet, these women sit alone with thoughts most people spend their entire lives running from. They reflect on childhood wounds, family trauma, abandonment, heartbreak, fear, and identity. Solitude forces them into conversations with themselves that relationships often distract people from having. And while others fear being alone with their own mind, these women slowly learn how to survive there. They begin discovering hidden parts of themselves buried beneath years of pleasing others. The little girl who never felt enough. The exhausted soul that carried everyone else's emotions. The woman who smiled while silently drowning. And in that painful silence, a transformation begins. Not loud, not dramatic, but sacred. The world celebrates loud love stories, but it rarely celebrates emotional healing. Nobody applauds the woman who chooses peace over chaos. Nobody congratulates the woman who walks away from emotionally addictive relationships just to protect her mental health. Nobody sees how difficult it is to sleep alone after becoming emotionally attached to someone who once felt like home. Yet these women continue walking through empty apartments, carrying invisible wars inside their chest. They learn how to cook for one person, how to celebrate birthdays quietly, how to survive weekends without emotional distractions. And slowly, they realize something extraordinary. Their loneliness is not killing them. Their loneliness is rebuilding them. There is a reason some women stop chasing relationships for a period of their life. Their soul becomes exhausted from emotional inconsistency. They become tired of modern love that feels more like psychological confusion than genuine connection. Tired of mixed signals, tired of temporary affection, tired of people who desire intimacy but fear commitment. And after enough disappointment, They begin protecting their energy like something sacred. People call them too independent, but what they really mean is this woman no longer abandons herself just to avoid being alone. And that frightens people, because a woman who learns how to emotionally survive alone becomes difficult to manipulate. Some women live alone because they are healing from invisible heartbreak nobody ever fully understood. Not every breakup ends with screaming arguments. Sometimes relationships end quietly, slowly, painfully. Sometimes a woman realizes she has been emotionally lonely even while lying beside someone every night. Imagine the psychological exhaustion of feeling unseen inside a relationship. Imagine giving your tenderness to someone who stopped noticing your emotional existence. There are women who left relationships not because they stopped loving, but because staying any longer would have destroyed the last pieces of themselves. And now they sit alone in silence trying to remember who they were before they confused suffering with loyalty. People think independence means these women no longer need love. That is not true. Deep inside, many of them still dream about connection. They still imagine being understood without having to explain every wound. They still desire intimacy that feels emotionally safe instead of emotionally draining. But now their standards are different. Their soul has matured through pain. They no longer fall in love with words alone. They observe energy, consistency, emotional presence, psychological depth. They watch how someone behaves during silence, conflict, disappointment, and vulnerability. Because once a woman experiences emotional betrayal, she realizes charm means nothing without emotional responsibility. There is also a spiritual dimension to solitude that many people never understand. Some women live alone because life is preparing them emotionally before their next chapter begins. Isolation can become a sacred space where identity is reborn. When distractions disappear, truth becomes louder. And in that silence, many women begin reconnecting with forgotten dreams, spirituality, creativity, purpose, and self-respect. They start hearing their intuition again. They stop settling for attention that weakens their peace. They realize love should not feel like survival. It should feel like emotional expansion. And perhaps the greatest lesson solitude teaches a woman is this: your worth does not disappear simply because nobody is currently holding your hand. There are moments when these women cry alone at night, and nobody knows. Moments when they miss human warmth so deeply it physically hurts. Moments when they question whether independence is strength or simply another form of emotional protection. Because even the strongest souls become tired sometimes. Humans were never designed to live without connection forever, and yet these women continue carrying themselves through difficult mornings with silent courage. They wake up, go to work, smile politely, handle responsibilities, return home, and battle emotional storms nobody can see. That kind of strength is rarely acknowledged because society only notices visible suffering. But hidden emotional endurance is often the most heroic form of survival. The truth is, many women who live alone have become emotionally intelligent in ways relationships forced them to become. Pain sharpened their intuition. Betrayal taught them boundaries. Silence taught them self-awareness. Loneliness taught them how to comfort themselves when nobody else did. And while the world may see an independent woman sitting alone in her apartment, what actually exists is someone who fought psychological battles that transformed her entire identity. These women often carry deep empathy because they understand emotional abandonment intimately. They know what it feels like to crave understanding in a world addicted to surface-level connection. Sometimes people assume a woman without a boyfriend must secretly be unwanted, but this reveals more about society's fear of solitude than about the woman herself. Because the truth is, many women are alone by choice, not because they cannot attract love, but because they refuse to betray themselves for temporary companionship. They have learned that being emotionally drained by the wrong person is far lonelier than sleeping alone peacefully. And once a woman experiences inner peace after emotional chaos, she becomes extremely protective of it. She stops entertaining people who arrive with confusion disguised as romance. There is a silent dignity in women who rebuild their life alone. A dignity most people overlook because it is not dramatic enough for attention. But think about it deeply. Imagine reconstructing your emotional world without depending on another person to save you. Imagine learning how to heal your own wounds while still functioning in daily life. Imagine carrying heartbreak without becoming bitter. That requires extraordinary emotional maturity. And often, The women who appear the calmest are the ones who survive the darkest psychological storms completely alone. Many of these women also carry an unspoken fear, the fear that maybe they have become too comfortable alone, too independent, too emotionally self-sufficient to ever fully trust someone again. And this fear creates an invisible conflict inside them. Part of their heart still longs for love. Another part remembers the devastation of disappointment. So they stand between desire and caution, wanting intimacy while protecting their peace. This inner conflict is exhausting, yet it also makes them incredibly deep human beings, because they no longer approach love naively. They approach it consciously. A woman who lives alone often develops a relationship with herself that many people never experience. She learns her emotional patterns, learns what triggers her sadness, learns how her mind behaves during loneliness. She becomes both the wounded child and the comforting mother inside her own soul. And over time, she stops seeing herself as incomplete. She begins understanding that a relationship should complement her life, not define her existence. This realization changes everything, because once a woman emotionally detaches her worth from male validation, she becomes psychologically free in a way society rarely prepares women for. But freedom comes with its own loneliness. There are evenings when silence feels peaceful, and other evenings when it feels unbearably heavy. There are days when independence feels empowering, and nights when emotional emptiness echoes through the room like a ghost. And this is the truth nobody talks about. Healing is not linear. Strength does not mean absence of pain. A woman can be deeply healed and still crave affection. She can love her solitude and still ache for companionship. Human emotions are not simple. They are oceans layered with contradiction. What makes these women extraordinary is not that they never feel lonely. It is that they continue loving life despite loneliness. They continue believing in meaningful connection despite heartbreak. They continue carrying softness inside a world that repeatedly tried to harden them. And perhaps this is their greatest strength of all. Not independence, not beauty, not success, but the ability to remain emotionally open after experiencing disappointment powerful enough to close the heart forever. There are women listening to this right now who feel unseen by the world. Women sitting quietly in rooms, wondering if their life has somehow fallen behind. Watching others get married, watching relationships appear online like perfect fairy tales, comparing their solitude to everyone else's public happiness. But what they do not realize is this. Many people in relationships are deeply lonely too. Some people sleep beside someone every night and still feel emotionally abandoned. Some people sacrifice their identity just to avoid being alone. Solitude is not always tragedy. Sometimes it is protection from becoming spiritually disconnected from yourself. And maybe this season of being alone is not punishment at all. Maybe life is teaching these women how to build emotional foundations that cannot collapse the moment another person leaves. Maybe solitude is training them to discover who they are beneath social expectations, romantic fantasies, and emotional dependency. Because eventually, when real love finally arrives, it will not arrive to complete them. It will arrive to meet them. Two whole souls, not two broken people trying to escape themselves through each other. One of the most misunderstood truths about women who live alone is that many of them are actually incredibly romantic deep inside. They have not stopped believing in love. They have simply stopped accepting counterfeit versions of it. They crave profound connection, eye contact that feels honest, conversations that reach the soul, loyalty that survives difficulty, emotional safety that allows vulnerability without fear. These women are not difficult to love. They are simply no longer willing to settle for love that lacks depth. There comes a point in every emotionally mature woman's life when she realizes peace is more valuable than attention. And once she reaches that point, her entire energy changes. She no longer chases, no longer begs, no longer performs emotional labor for people unwilling to reciprocate. She becomes selective with access to her heart, not because she is arrogant, but because she finally understands how sacred emotional energy truly is. And perhaps this is why truly healed women often appear mysterious. They no longer seek validation externally because they have already survived their own darkness internally. The modern world often glorifies constant connection, but many women secretly feel exhausted by it. Endless texting, superficial flirting, emotional inconsistency, digital intimacy without real commitment. Many women living alone are not disconnected from people because they are incapable of love. They are disconnected because they hunger for something real in a culture obsessed with emotional convenience. Their soul refuses to participate in shallow intimacy anymore, and that refusal is not weakness, it is self-respect awakening. Somewhere tonight, a woman is sitting alone by a window staring at the darkness outside while carrying memories nobody knows about. Memories of loving too hard, trusting too deeply, giving too much. And while the world assumes she is simply single, her silence actually contains entire emotional universes. She is rebuilding faith in herself, relearning joy, rediscovering identity, healing invisible wounds. And perhaps the most beautiful part of her journey is this. Even after everything life has done to her heart, she still secretly hopes love exists. That hope matters more than people realize, because after emotional pain, many people become cynical forever. But women who continue believing in meaningful connection despite disappointment possess rare emotional courage. Their softness becomes revolutionary in a cold world. Their vulnerability becomes strength. Their patience becomes wisdom. And their solitude becomes sacred because it taught them the difference between attachment and genuine love. The deepest truth about women who live alone without a boyfriend is not that they are lonely. It is that they are evolving. They are becoming emotionally conscious human beings in a society that often rewards emotional dependency. They are learning how to hear their own intuition instead of constantly seeking external approval. They are learning how to sit with discomfort instead of escaping it through temporary relationships. And through this process, they become incredibly powerful, not loudly, but spiritually. If you are one of these women listening right now, understand this deeply. Your life is not behind. Your worth is not reduced because you sleep alone. Your femininity is not measured by relationship status, and your future is not defined by this current season of solitude. Some souls require isolation before destiny unfolds. Some hearts must heal completely before receiving the kind of love capable of protecting their spirit instead of damaging it further. Trust the timing of your emotional evolution. One day the loneliness you survived will become the reason you never settle again. One day, the silence that once frightened you will become the foundation of your inner peace. One day, you will look back at these solitary nights and realize they were not empty at all. They were shaping you into someone emotionally unbreakable, someone capable of loving without losing themselves, someone strong enough to walk away from anything that dishonors their soul. And perhaps that is the final truth nobody tells women who live alone. You are not waiting for life to begin. Life is already happening inside your transformation, inside your healing, inside your tears, your resilience, your self-discovery, your quiet prayers, your lonely mornings, your courageous survival. The world may only see a woman alone in a room, but spiritually, psychologically, emotionally, an entire universe is being reborn there. So tonight, if your room feels silent, do not mistake silence for emptiness. Some of the most profound transformations happen quietly. Some of the strongest women are built in isolation, and some of the deepest love stories begin the moment a woman finally learns how to belong to herself first.